when I look back to like when we launched Casper, like we did a photo shoot. We had like 12 great images. Those lasted us a long time. Now that would get you to lunch. Like you just need to be constantly feeding this content machine because that's where people are discovering brands. They're not discovering brands on the brand's website.
Right.
They're discovering them maybe on Instagram, certainly on TikTok.
Right.
And for those platforms to work, you need to be so active.
Hello, everybody. This is Tetsuro from Off Topic. We're here at the Red Antler offices for another episode of our video interview series. I'm here with Emily Heyward, one of the co-founders of Red Antler. Emily, thank you for having us over at your offices.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation.
And this is a relatively new office.
It is. After a very long time in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Dumbo, we have moved back to Manhattan, which is where it all began for Red Antler. So it's really exciting. I love being back in Manhattan.
I remember the Dumbo offices because I was there, I think in 2019.
Okay.
It was very busy at that time as well.
Yes. And in 2019, we had just done a huge renovation because we needed to make more room for all of our team members because we were still a 5-day-a-week in-person culture. That has shifted dramatically for us.
What is it now?
Completely flexible.
Okay.
So we do have meetings that team members come in for on Tuesdays. A lot of people come in. If there's a client in town, people will come in, but we have no mandated day that everybody needs to be in the office. So that enabled us to shift to a space that makes more sense for how we're currently using the space. And I think that we were all excited about having a smaller, better space that was more suited to how we're currently working.
Amazing. So for the listeners who might not know you, please introduce yourself and what Red Antler does.
Yes, so I'm Emily Heyward. I am one of the founders of Red Antler. Started the business 18 years ago. So I had, prior to Red Antler, gotten my career started in traditional advertising. I was working on big global brands, a lot of TV campaigns. In 2007, the New York startup scene was really getting going. There were a lot of new businesses that were popping up that were really thinking about how to take advantage of new emerging technology and create better experiences for people. And this was, the year the iPhone launched, just to put things in context. And when we started Red Antler, our vision was to build a creative services company that was designed specifically to be a partner to founders. So in the early days, we only worked with pre-launch startups. We had an offering that was very much designed to bring new businesses into the world. We're now obviously 18 years in, and our business has evolved, and we work with businesses at all stages, including large global companies. But I think people still come to us because they're looking to really future-proof success and think about how to use the power of creativity to create relevance now and well into the future.
Got it. And then who are some of the clients that you've worked with, both in terms of the startup side and also, the kind of existing kind of larger brands as well?
Yeah, on the startup side, we've launched so many exciting businesses. We worked with Figure Robotics. Recently we launched a skincare company with Martha Stewart called Elm Biosciences. Really across many different industries, everything from like hardcore tech to skincare to CPG. We launched a Labna brand, which is like a dairy-based dip called Bezzy. So those are some of the more recent ones. In the past, we helped launch Casper, Allbirds, Prose, which is a hair care company that's moved into skincare. So many through the years. On the more established side, we're currently working with McKinsey & Company, which is, the most prominent consulting firm in the world. And, we've worked with the NBA in the past and other sort of bigger global businesses.
Got it. And so I think, one of the core theses between Red Antler was working with founders, and, you still are today. So I think a lot of brands come to you with very little data, right? Very little information or like what they're actually doing. What's kind of the process that you kind of go through with these founders in order to find, their brand identity?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When we're working on a pre-launch business, we have no data, right? I mean, they've done the work to determine that this is a business worth launching.
Right.
So people don't come to us at the stage when they're just like dreaming up what they might want to launch one day, right? Like they have a business plan, they have a plan to fundraise, they have a path to profitability, they intend to scale.
Right.
So they've done research that there's a viable business. But on the consumer side, we know very little. And we will try our best to gather as much data as we can. Usually for a pre-launch founder, that will take the form of qualitative research, meaning like interviews with people rather than trying to do some big study, which can be expensive and costly, and it doesn't even necessarily get what you need.
Right.
And then we do a lot of cultural research. So really more desk research, like what's going on in culture? What are people talking about on TikTok? Like, how do we make sure that the brand that we're putting in place is meeting the moment and really thinking about like where this category is heading or where it could head?
Right.
But I think that the trick to a lot of this is you need to have a strong hypothesis. You want to come out with a strong point of view, but you also have to recognize that a brand is going to be a living, breathing thing.
Right.
And you're not building like a marble statue,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
you're building something that's going to need to flex and adapt as the world changes and as the business inevitably changes.
How do you kind of balance this kind of like meeting the moment versus keeping kind of a long sustainable kind of brand identity?
I think that's one of the core challenges of our business and something that we've gotten very good at through the years because we work with so many startups at the very first step. I think that it's about making sure that the brand we're putting in the world is really speaking to like a universal need, something that's not just of the moment, like not just about a trend or a specific moment in time, but really answering like a deep fundamental need that is not currently being met. But then on the creative side, we have to build in enough flexibility that a brand can continue to market in new and refreshing ways. So to me, there's a difference between brand identity and marketing, and we do both. Ideally, a brand identity is going to last for decades, if not a century. Marketing gets updated. Like you're going to run a campaign that could be live for a couple of weeks, and then you move on to the next thing, and that can be much more of the moment and tapping into like what's going on right now. So I think again, it's about making sure we have that flexibility and that we're not just anchored on a few key things that must always remain true.
I'm curious on your thoughts about like brand colors and because I think there's been kind of a shift where like now you see some brands have multiple colors or they change colors over time. Some like Hermes, right, Tiffany, they have their signature colors, right? What's your thoughts on like is the answer either depending on the brand or
I think it depends on the category. I also think even within a category, color is one tool in the toolkit. So for a brand like Hermes and Tiffany, color is like the most recognizable, identifiable thing, which has worked well for them. It helps that they have a physical component. I think with a digital business, it's much harder to anchor on one color, even just from a usability perspective. But sometimes it makes sense to try to create like that ownable, recognizable color. Other times it might be something else. It might be a symbol. It might be a mascot. It might be, you want to have those things that people see and recognize and that stick with them over time. It can be color. It can be other things too.
Got it. But I think the other thing that you've pointed out in your book as well is that I think a lot of people associate brand with just the logo or just the color, just the font, but that's not what a brand is, right? That's only part of it. Can you talk about what a brand actually is?
Yes. So I'm so glad you brought this up because I think this is a common like misunderstanding. I think that logos and colors and fonts are a very important expression of your brand, but they do not equal your brand. Like there are so many people that can design a very nice looking logo. That is not going to be what leads to business success. What leads to success is what sits underneath that, which is having an incredibly clear idea of what you stand for and why people should care and how you want to show up in people's lives. And Then you design a logo that can convey those feelings. But, we'll have people sometimes say like, oh, I want a logo like the Nike swoosh. And I'm like, the Nike swoosh? I mean, sure, I love it. It's great. Like, I wear Nikes. But it wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't attached to Nike,
Yes.
which stands for so much in people's lives and culture. If you just saw that on a piece of paper, you wouldn't feel all the things you feel when you see it now.
Right. And I'm assuming, the competitive landscape has significantly shifted. The channels have significantly shifted, where maybe in the past with like mass TV, it was a lot easier to get someone to remember a single logo versus now, people are inundated by all sorts of content. Can you talk about how this has shifted and how kind of your framework has shifted in terms of working with founders?
I mean, it's shifted even during the time that we've been in business. Like, forget TV.
Right.
I sometimes think about what we were able to do in like 2015, 2016 to really help a business propel faster to success. It wouldn't work now. Like, we're living in a totally different era,
Can you
even
talk
just
about
in
the
the
difference
past
here? Yeah.
10 years. So I think one is that this cycle of innovation has just gotten so much faster. Like, I think the barriers to starting a new business are much lower.
Right.
And I think that in a given period of time, like 6 different people might be working on the same thing. So it's just it doesn't help to just be the new thing in a category, because there's going to be lots of new things in that category. But even more than that, I think that like the content machine has just become so much more robust. And, when I look back to like when we launched Casper, like we did a photo shoot, we had like 12 great images. Those lasted us a long time. Now that would get you like to lunch. Like you just need to be constantly feeding this content machine, because that's where people are discovering brands. They're not discovering brands on the brand's website.
Right.
They're discovering them maybe on Instagram, certainly on TikTok.
Right.
And for those platforms to work, you need to be so active.
And how do you, is the answer just to create more and more content? And is that like how we're going to like evolve in the future? We're just going to have to keep on creating, or like, is there a different way here?
I don't think so. I also think that can be a race to the bottom. Like, it can't just be quantity over quality.
Right.
And we still spend a lot of time and effort on putting that foundation in place. It's not like that foundation doesn't matter. I think it matters even more in some ways, because there's so much noise.
Right.
So I think that brands need to be incredibly thoughtful about, again, like why they matter, why someone should choose them, especially for the startup. Startups are competing against like the incumbent, right? Like the original brand that sort of started the category, but they're also competing against all the other startups, and they're just competing for like attention in general. So again, I don't think it's just about being the loudest. I think it has to be about being the smartest and really figuring out like, what can you say and what can you do that no one else can? And how are you going to form unique relationships? And that's not just about, oh, they liked my like TikTok post. Like someone could like a post and then forget about it in 5 minutes. That's often what happens. And that's not going to be the right strategy for every business anyway. I think there are businesses that have succeeded just by being like prolific, like just constantly, and that's fine. That's like a strategy in itself. I don't think that makes sense for most businesses.
And I think like, I think one of the unique things about doing business here in the US, at least compared to Japan, is that a lot of brands try to be culturally relevant, right? Can you talk a little bit about like what that means, like how you kind of advise brands to look at culture and how this changes in a very fast hype cycle?
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. I think that like there are a lot of missteps too, especially brands that try to meet the moment and stumble. Like it's sometimes worse than not trying at all.
It could be very cringe.
Yeah. Again, I think there's brands that like that's their whole thing, and they're just like every meme they're going to jump on that meme, and people expect it of them, and it's like part of their identity, and they do it very well. I think for most brands, it has to be extremely thoughtful and really through the lens of, again, do we have something to say here that A, like adds value to the conversation, and B, that we can uniquely say, not just like we're jumping on a bandwagon because
Right.
that happens to be what everybody's doing right now, but like, do we have a role to play here that only we could play?
Right. How do you kind of advise brands to either like stop themselves, because like it's so tempting, right? And it could potentially get you a lot of views as well. You can jump on the Taylor Swift bandwagon, right? Of like whenever she does something, you can kind of hop on that. You can do something with every like Severance or all these different TV shows. Like there's so many things you can do. How do you kind of how should companies think about this?
I think it goes back to having a really clear brand strategy that then translates to a social strategy. And again, that comes down to having a point of view of what is the role we're playing in this channel. Not just like what's the role of the channel, but what's the role that we're uniquely playing? How do we want to be forming connections with consumers in this space? And then I think it requires a good degree of discipline. And look, rules are in place to be broken, and there's
Right.
going to be times when it's just like too good not to jump into the conversation. If someone has a really great idea and it's
Yep.
funny and it fits the brand strategy or maybe slightly left of it, that's fine. But I think that you need to default to like, does this make sense for us before just like adding to the noise?
You talk in your book about this idea of like tension and like juxtapositions, like having two different kind of like opposite identities kind of merging into one to make it interesting. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that, and then some examples?
Yeah, I think that for me, this is about how we build a brand personality that ends in a place that's unique. And it's about making sure there's nuance because, the default is like, I want my brand to be confident and trusted. But
Yeah.
it's like, well, who doesn't want that, right? If you think about the people that you know who are interesting, there are contradictions, there are things to discover. I think that the brand that we've helped build for Hinge is a really good example, where at the end of the day, Hinge, which is a dating app, is a business that exists to help people fall in love. And there's something very tender and sincere about that. But we created a campaign for them where we're like murdering this like fuzzy little cute icon
Yep.
in disgusting, violent ways. I mean, the whole idea is when you meet someone on Hinge and you fall in love, you delete the app. So
Right.
we show this version of the app icon getting destroyed. And I think that was so much more successful than if we had tried to just approach it in this very earnest way where you see two people on a date,
Right.
like looking at each other with like googly eyes. It's like, who wants to see that?
Right.
And it still all fits with Hinge's mission and personality. But again, there's surprise built in. It's not what you would expect from an app that
Right.
is about finding real connections.
Can you talk about like the creative campaigns that you've done? Hinge, Casper, all these ones. I think you try to elicit different emotions, right? And I think it's not just about showing the function of it. I think I remember when I talked to Blake Lyons, your chief business officer. He was talking about the Casper campaign where you refuse to show a picture of people sleeping at night, and it was all in the day when they're awake. Can you talk about why you chose that, and then talk a little bit about the emotions that you're trying to build?
Yeah, so when we launched Casper, very different point in time.
Yes.
And at the time, there were not 200 e-com mattress brands.
Right.
In fact, most people were very skeptical that you could even sell a mattress online because the behavior at the time, it's hard to remember now, is that you'd go to a showroom and you'd like lie on different beds to see which one was comfortable. So we saw an opportunity to completely change the rules of the category. And all of these different mattress brands were competing on this idea of like a great night's sleep and showing people cozy in a
Right.
dark room. But nobody at the time was talking about what a great night's sleep gives you, which is actually waking up and feeling
Right.
good and
It's
living
what
your
matters.
exactly. Like
Right.
that's the part you're even aware of,
Right.
right?
Yes, that's right.
So we built the brand all around this idea of like awakening your best day and potential, and then brought in a lot of humor to that brand too.
Right.
And I think that what was so successful about the campaign, which started on the New York subway, and it was all these very intricately illustrated cartoon characters of all the different types of people who slept on Caspers. was that it brought a little joy to people's day. So it almost like did what we were ultimately saying the mattress did.
Right.
You'd be on the subway in the morning, you're tired, you don't feel great, and then you'd see this campaign that like brightened your commute a little bit, and that gives you a feeling of what sleeping on a Casper could also do for you. So obviously that's subconscious, but that was part of what we were intending with that campaign is how do we bring people that feeling of joy and like uplifting that we wanted the mattress to stand for too.
What would be like a modern day version of that? Because obviously that was a little bit back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're always trying with all of our campaign work to connect with people on a human level and tap into something that they know deep down to be true. So we recently did a campaign for a brand called Nix that makes a lot of amazing products, but this campaign, it specifically was about leak-proof underwear for women. So it's underwear women wear when they are menstruating. Very like stigmatized topic. But our team came up with this idea that was this very natural human behavior that women engage in where you ask your friend to kind of check if you're good.
Right.
And every woman was like, oh yeah, I totally do that. The men, and I'm sorry to like, I hope this doesn't make you uncomfortable.
No.
The men were like, what is this? And we're like, no, trust me. This like happens. And it's like, am I good? Am I good? And like, we turned that very human moment between friends into a campaign and then got a celebrity, Kristen Bell, who's amazing and has that kind of best friend persona to be the face of the campaign. And I think she brought, again, it takes so much more to stand out these days.
Right.
She brought this like really authentic vibe, but also helped propel the campaign to more visibility.
Makes sense. And then you mentioned, a little bit before that a brand is a living, kind of breathing thing that changes over time. How do you, one, convince founders, because a lot of founders are kind of stuck on the core, and then to kind of evolve the brand, and then what are the steps that you actually take to actually change it?
I actually find that it's sometimes the opposite.
Okay.
And people like want to evolve too rapidly.
Interesting.
I think that businesses now are growing so quickly and expanding so quickly. And I think sometimes the impulse is like, well, we've moved into this new vertical. We need a new identity,
Yeah.
And again, I think it goes back to discipline. And if you've built the brand right from the start, ideally, like there's a large enough umbrella to encompass new target audiences, new features, without having to change the foundation.
Got it. How do you keep a brand flexible enough that they can evolve versus one that's kind of too stuck, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to making sure that you're building a brand that's about a core truth and not just a function or a feature. And even at the level of the name, right? I think a lot of businesses find themselves in a very tricky spot if they've picked a name that literally describes what they do at that moment in time, because then when the business inevitably evolves, the name doesn't suit them anymore. And a name is something that ideally you're never changing.
Right.
Like that's the hardest thing to change.
Yeah.
More than even a logo, it's really tough to change a name. So we really, with very few exceptions, try to convince founders that the name should not describe what the business does, but instead should evoke a feeling, and then you have everything around it that can describe what the business does.
And does that change whether if it's a CPG brand, a software brand, a hardware brand?
Great question. I think that one of the few exceptions is food, as well as physical location brands where people need to walk by and like know what it is. So I did not name this business, but like Soul Cycle, right? Like you get a sense. So that way the storefront can almost function like a billboard. I think that's a great name because there's feeling, but you also are like, oh, cycle.
Right.
It's a
It's
spin
an
class.
exercise,
Exactly. And food too in the grocery store, even if it's not like literal, you do want to drive appetite appeal. Like it needs to feel like the name of a food. I know that sounds abstract, but like you can't have something where you're like, oh, I wouldn't want to eat that.
That's true.
But software is the one where I think it's almost always a mistake to pick a literal name.
Interesting.
Almost
Interesting.
always, because those businesses, if not pivot, certainly evolve, and it's so much like more likely that they're going to add new features
Right.
or entirely new offerings
Right.
underneath the same brand, and I think they can get really stuck if the name is too literal.
So you've argued that I think every customer touch point is, is brand, right? It's an opportunity for you to convey your message as a brand. What do you think is an overlooked touch point today that is kind of a big opportunity?
Yeah, so I love this. And, I've certainly talked in the past about how customer service is a key touch point. And I think that typically when people hear that, they think it's about sort of how an interaction with the brand goes. And that's definitely a big part of it, right? Like, can you reach a human if you need to? Are they friendly? Are they, I think that's that's one of the few times that a consumer is actually like literally interacting with the brand, and it makes a huge impact. But I would build on that even more. And I think that an untapped area is actually like customer service policies and thinking about ways that you can show people that you're more on their side than anyone else without losing money, right? Without being irresponsible. Because I think we're living in an era, especially right now in the United States, where you kind of feel like everyone's out to get you. Like so many perks are being stripped away. Like everything's just like a little worse. And I think that if a brand could really show up as an ally and kind of help you achieve something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve or like give you an edge, I think that that would create so much love.
Interesting. I really like that. A lot of companies also talk about like community, right? But I feel like that word is very overused.
Yes.
Should all brands try to build a community? And if so, like what's kind of the steps there?
So I think it depends how you define community. I think if you're talking about a literal community where you have like active and engaged social followers, no, I don't think that that's realistic for all brands. Like there's plenty of brands that I love that I don't even follow on social, but I still feel like I'm part of their community. So my definition of community is a little bit broader. And I think that brands who have built strong communities are brands in which people feel their choice of the brand is part of their identity. Like it means something about me that I wear this type of sneaker, or I drink this brand of whatever, coffee, And I think that is a form of community that can be just as powerful, if not more, than like comments on Instagram.
Got it. And then in terms of like brand activations, right? I think, for example, like Away, when they first started, they used their hard book cover, right? I think all these different brands have, unique ways in terms of conveying and kind of activating their initial kind of customer base. How do you kind of like go through that process of finding these kind of unique processes and unique kind of activations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool if done strategically, right? I think that the temptation can kind of sometimes be like, wouldn't it be cool if? But you do have to think about the return on investment. It's not going to be the same as return on investment for like ad spend where you can like literally see it, right? It's more of, investing in your overarching relationship with your consumer. And, we didn't work on Away, but I love that brand. I'm a huge fan. And I think what they did was so smart because, they were really trying to create a lifelong relationship with their first purchasers. This is a brand that you can like come back to over time. They wanted to stand for travel, not just luggage. And I think that including this physical book for the first people who were like engaging with this brand, I have to imagine cemented that relationship stronger. I think that sometimes, especially if you're a new brand, you can invest in tactics for your early customers that might not be scalable and may not make sense like in the long term. But if you can build love among that first set of people, that is so powerful.
Because they're going to go and tell all their friends.
100%. And like there's a potential they could be with you for life.
Right. I mean, so the initial investment of a book, obviously it's hard to always tell the ROI on that, but if they keep coming back, time and time again, and if they refer customers to you, that all makes up for it.
100%. Here we are still talking about
Right.
it, and it was 10 years
Right.
ago.
That's right. That's right.
And we remember it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the book. What a good idea.
So it almost feels like sometimes it's important to build these kind of like either it might be like friction or it might be some kind of hurdle for people to overcome as well, because that creates a bigger sense of accomplishment for users, for brands as well.
Totally. I think it actually ties into the same topic, which is again, how do you engage and activate the people who love you most, right? And I think if something's like a little hard to get in this world where like I could order something on Amazon and have it arrive like
Yes.
this evening, like by the time I get home from work, then it makes it more special. Like we're not used to that now, to
Right.
have to like work a little harder. And I think that it makes you feel like you're more a part of the brand because you scored this special item or invite or
Right.
whatever it might be. Think about the people who line up for sneakers.
Right. Right. Or even Apple.
Sure,
Yeah.
totally.
For a new
They're
iPhone.
a great example.
Yeah. How do, for example, like software companies build friction then? Because oftentimes, the point for them is to make it frictionless. But then if you want to create kind of this meaning as well, sometimes you want to intentionally create friction, right?
Yeah, well, I think again, you can think of it as friction, or you can think of it as how do we create barriers that make a certain set of people feel really special. So I like to think of the positive side of friction as like who are we letting in?
Right.
And I think we've seen so many software companies that will have like a private beta, or they'll release new features only to a subset of people, and then
Right.
people start to hear about it, and they're
Yep.
like, "Wait, I want that thing! Like,
Yep.
how did you get that thing?"
Definitely. So you mentioned about this kind of idea of like advertising, and that's easier to see the ROI. I think this is a question that every brand faces of, should we put money into advertising? Should we put money into brand? Well, advertising, it's easier to see the ROI. Maybe we should just put money there. For earlier stage brands, and then as they scale, do you think the balance should shift? Does it depend just on the category? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago that was largely founders, and this topic was brought up like in every session. I think the truth is we're now at a point where only investing in like performance marketing, so like the sort of lower funnel measurable marketing, is actually an impossible path to growth for most businesses. It is just, it's gotten more expensive. It's gotten more crowded.
Right.
And I think that every smart marketer is recognizing that you need a balance. So like you absolutely need that performance spend that you can measure and see a return on. But if you're not like lifting those efforts with an investment in bigger kind of brand moments and awareness, it's a really tough fight. Like it's just like each dollar is going to work less and less and less. You're going to see diminishing returns.
Right.
You've got to be doing that extra effort that helps you stand out, that then when someone sees the ad, like they're already aware of you, they know what you want them to feel, So I think we're actually seeing a shift back where people are valuing brand building and awareness building more than they were at a moment in time where when the performance marketing was so effective,
Right.
it was really hard to justify putting a dollar anywhere else.
Got it. And do you think that keeps shifting back and forth? And then in the age of AI, I'm assuming, does brand become more important or less important?
I hope more. I think more. I think it's interesting, right? With AI, are people just going to be going to agents to make brand decisions, right? Like if you needed a new winter coat, I just go to consumer because it's like easier to wrap your head around. Or are you just going to ask your agent, like, hey, you know me, you know I hate skiing, but I also hate being cold. What coat should I get? But then when we think about where these agents are getting their information and how important places like Reddit are, just sort of the conversations that are happening throughout, the digital landscape. I do think that's where a brand will play a very heavy role. And I think that people will also need a way to ultimately like make those choices
Right.
that feels human. And I think again, that's where a brand will have a real opportunity to like step up and sort of rise above this kind of artificial landscape.
Makes sense. So one question about Japan, and then I want to bring it towards the end here. So I think a lot of Japanese brands, when they come into the U.S. market, there's always a struggle about how much Japanese-ness to incorporate. Like, should we have all the Japanese characters? Should we say it's from Japan? What level should we do? What's kind of your advice in terms of how to think about how much of your culture to put in?
First of all, I love Japan. I went to Japan on my honeymoon. So
Amazing.
you might be asking the wrong person because I'm like, all the Japan.
Put everything in there.
I think that we talk about this a lot with businesses that are from a different country or even like a state within the United States. Like there's certain locations that I think carry with them a set of associations and values.
Right.
And it can be a really helpful shorthand. So for example, like the state of Vermont, like if a brand is from Vermont, like that means something to people
Yes.
about nature and like environmentalism and
Right.
like if that is part of who you want to be as a brand, it can be really helpful to be like made in Vermont.
Right.
If it's not, it matters less. So I think the answer for brands that are coming here from Japan is like, do the associations with Japan help strengthen the bigger story that you want to be telling about your brand? You know, through our venture fund, Habitat Partners, we invested in an amazing Japanese skincare brand called Dam Dam. Love them.
They have stores in Tokyo as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're in Sephora, and I noticed in their display, because we didn't do the branding, they're leaning into Japanese cues, which I think is really helpful in skincare. I think that Americans generally have a very positive association with like Asian countries in general and Japan specifically, and their approach to skincare, feeling that it's advanced, feeling that there's cutting edge ingredients and science. So in their case, I think it makes a ton of sense to really like lean into the fact that the brand is Japanese.
Got it. And then I think I remember, I think this was before Red Antler, you work with Itoen as well.
Yes, I did. Yes, amazing memory. Yeah.
And so you've definitely worked with a lot of brands and kind of figuring out what to put in, what not to put in.
Yes,
So.
and look again in that case, a green tea business.
Yes.
Why would you not lead with the fact that you're from Japan?
Right,
You know,
right.
I mean, I think they're an interesting one. They were almost ahead of their time, especially now that like matcha is
Yes.
like everywhere.
Yes.
But I think that Itoen has still an incredibly authentic positioning because they didn't try to just Americanize it.
Right. No, that makes sense. I want to do, lastly, kind of a quick fire round, but I want to do it a little bit differently how I usually do it. I want to mention a brand that you've worked with, and then I want you to come back with 1 to 3 words that you think encapsulates it. So we'll start off with one that we talked about a few times here, Casper.
Playful,
Allbirds.
mission-driven,
Figure.
optimism for the future. That's 4 words, but
We'll take it. We'll
future
take it.
optimism.
There we go. Hinge.
Connection,
Pop-up bagels.
authentic,
And Ramp.
growth.
Incredible. Well, Emily, thank you so much for your time. This has been
Thank
an incredible
you.
learning opportunity, and I hope you come back to Japan again.
I would love to.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.